to America is be true to what you said on paper.
The faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will guide our country and all who serve it. By any means necessary.
Hey, welcome to the Chalkboard Conversations podcast presented by Party Politics US on Spikefish Radio. I'm your host, Atiba, and later on I'm going to be joined by my friends and co-hosts, Nayada, Earl, and Seldom Seen. But now we're going to be doing the show a little bit differently. It gives me an opportunity to do an editorial segment, which I'm kind of excited about doing, though I'm going to try and hold it together a little bit too, because it's all about, what's going on and what we've been seeing over the last 16, 17 days. And this segment is going to be called This is America, and it will happen at the beginning of each one of our segments. So hopefully in the future, I will have recorded this, but because we're doing this a day earlier, I am doing this live. So forgive me if I stumble, mumble, but I will definitely try to keep this as clear as I possibly can. And with that said, I'm going to start this off by just saying that, like many African-American men, I have a story about the police. And this one, I wasn't quite 19 years old, and I had arrived at a friend's home. And then all of a sudden, I get out, and the lights were flashing behind me, and a policeman came up to me to inform me that I'd run a stop sign. And my friend and his mother, they came out, and to be honest, I was a bit embarrassed, but I was also confused because I knew where the stop signs were and I wasn't going to run through any. So looking back, though, I realized things could have gone differently because 5 more squad cars arrived. And as those police lights were spinning around me, I squinted and said, my uncle is an attorney. And I kept looking for their badge numbers and hoping that the presence of my friend and his mom would push the officers away. What I recall most about that night is they didn't issue me a ticket, and I was incredibly upset for the rest of the night. But how that could have all gone wrong. And that's like one of the several stories that, every day I mention it because parents send their child to a playground like Tamir Rice's mom did, hoping their child will come home. Or they sit at home playing video games with a loved one, looking out the window, hoping the police don't mistakenly shoot into their home like they did to Tatiana Jefferson. And then, we all hope that when we get in our cars that we don't end up like Sandra Bland or George Floyd, killed for just driving while Black. And I've heard some of my white friends say, if they complied with the police, and I want to tell you that that is a bad word and stop using it in this context. How do you comply when you're killed for playing with a toy gun on the playground? Why can't you be safe in your own home? What is the crime for having a minor infraction that should result in a ticket but not being taken to jail? The question you should be asking is, why does qualified immunity exist, and why do so many officers get away with murder? Now let's look at the history of the police. Police patrols used to be called slave patrols. The overseer was white, and his job was to keep the Blacks in line by using any means necessary to get them to do as much work as inhumanly possible to keep us from trying to escape and keep us from mounting any sort of insurrection against the slave owners that we outnumbered. Today, the overseer is the police chiefs and the commanders. They're white and they're Black, but they wear white. Their job is to keep the wealthy and those who attach themselves to them safe. The officers are the slave drivers. They're white and Black, but they wear the blue uniform. Always promise special privileges for keeping the lot of us in line. They are tasked with the same responsibility that the slave patrols in the 1600s had. Protect the property, suppress rebellions of the masses, and like the protests we see today, keep us in line. A US Today article said, during slavery, slave patrols of men launched centuries of violent and racist behavior toward Black Americans, as well as created a necessary tradition of protests and uprisings against police brutality. And just like today, there was no place to hide, no place to be safe. Across the US, Black Americans lived in fear of law enforcement officials armed with weapons who monitored their behavior, attacked them on the street, in their homes, and killed them for just the slightest provocation. So like Sunday evening, I was driving in Georgetown on Wisconsin and N Street Northwest. I found two police vans that were blocking N Street. And for reference, Wisconsin Avenue has the popular stores like Apple and Ralph Lauren and The Gap. And many of the storefronts in that area now boarded up. Police cars and white police officers with a few black officers stood around in blue shirts around a 2 to 3 block radius. But all at the same time, the protests were going on at the White House. Behind those two vans were 3 tables that looked like they were associated with Martin's Tavern. A white officer in a white shirt was addressing them and those standing, and all of them appeared to be white. I was driving and had no desire to stop or hear what they were saying. My blood was boiling, my mind was racing, and I felt like my ancestors were probably speaking to me saying, keep going. What struck me the difference of 2 Sundays. See, the previous Sunday, the first night of one of the curfews, I curiously drove through Georgetown. And there I found a few young people in small groups, and they were dressed in black, except for some reason in every group I noticed that one was wearing red, and they all wore black masks. All around them, there were workers quickly putting up plywood to cover store windows. And as I headed home, I passed a long line of police cars waiting at the bottom of a hill on Wisconsin Avenue. They were present, but out of sight. It's kind of fitting that the police is just driving by now. And they appeared to be waiting for the ruckus to start. If you grew up in a city like DC, you learned to see things like this, and it made me wonder, already knowing the answer. Why aren't they up on the hill, walking around, or strategically placed to deter any vandalism? In broad daylight, a week later, there they were with the white people, making them feel safe. At night, the week before, they were lying in wait for the mischief of the young black children to begin. I kind of feel like that those officers, that white officer in his white shirt was saying to that group on Sunday afternoon, we are here to keep you safe. While the officers a week earlier were waiting for, forgive my French, the little niggas to act out. And the byproduct of 400 years of institutionalized and systemic racism goes back to the slave patrols. It's a story burglarized by history books that steal the story of the neglected, create images of success born from the theft of life from Africa, cultivated by robbing the dignity of a people, forced to work and build an economic system to benefit whites at the detriment of blacks. Even when the black community managed to despite the redlining social inequities, build thriving communities, bombs have been literally and were literally dropped on us in Tulsa, Rosewood, and Wilmington, to name a few. We laughingly speak of Karen and Arizona and in New York and Arizona, but we cry foul as if when they say this is their country, where the money and the wealth of America has been taken from blacks, where the livelihood of families have been ripped apart by police taking our men away. Drugs and guns dropped in our neighborhoods like the bombs that were literally dropped on our wealthy Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, Florida. The language of allegedly believed to be, felt my life was in danger and fit the description have long been an excuse to murder and upend the lives of Black America. The white Karens of the world existed long before today, and the cowardly acts of white men and the collusion of Black officers in this epidemic of murder and displacement of Black families has happened for far too long. In Tulsa, you use cowardly acts, fear and despair, saying a young Black man raped one of your precious young women, even though historical accounts record that she wasn't raped or assaulted, even though you tried. You use this as your reason to burn and bomb a thriving Black community of millionaires from the air. In Rosewood, you use a white woman, accused a Black man of raping her, and you burned a thriving community of Blacks, even though she was having an affair with a white man. And when poor whites banded together with Blacks to change the course of history and won seats in office during the populist movement, you gathered in a mob of 2,000 and burned down our community. More than 20 years ago, the group NWA released the song, Fuck the Police. There are a lot of Black Americans who felt that way then and feel that way now, because for far too long, the police have been fucking with us. This is America. sorry guys. I mean, just in terms of like that, it's hard, and I want you all to know that there's a lot of built up frustration, anger, disappointment. But this is America. And so as we see what's going on around the country in light of what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the list continues to go on and on. I'm inspired by the millions who are standing up and speaking out, the people who have the courage to run for office, like our next guest, Janice Lewis George. And sorry, Janice, to be bringing you in after, I guess, doing such an emotional appeal. We're going to make this a little bit lighter for you and for our audience as we talk about it. But these are just issues that are, I think, on the mind of many of us. And there are issues that I hope that we have finally reached that day that we're going to address and that we're going to finally overcome and move forward as a nation. So
Absolutely, that was beautiful.
Thank you. That said, thank you for joining us in your campaign colors and your regal purple. And let me just tell everyone, those of you who don't know, Janice Lewis George is a Ward 4 Democratic nominee. She just recently won last week the nomination. Many of you guys probably saw me talk about the long lines. I'm gonna tell you, Janice was out there standing until 2:00 until the last vote was cast. She's a former assistant attorney general here in Washington, D.C. and in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so with that, I want to say congratulations and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Atiba. I am so happy to be here with you all. And yeah, you're right. Those lines were all the way to miles long. We had lines miles long. And so that last voter didn't get in until about 1:09 and we didn't leave until 2 a.m. We cheered everybody on and just kept giving people food and taking care of them during that time. And it was, it was heartbreaking to see the disenfranchisement, but it was wonderful to see us coming together and helping our community and to see how many people were ready for change, that they would stand in the line till 2 a.m. to vote.
Yeah, I think that's like an inspiring part about democracy and all that. And I know that for the last few weeks, even like in these days since the election, you've still been going nonstop. Mm-hmm. I wanted to kind of you were with us a few months ago on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us then. It's so great to have you back now as the Democratic nominee. You and I, we have a small world. I mean, like your husband, Kyle, and my nephew went to college together at Morehouse.
Yep.
You grew up on Kennedy Street, 2nd and Kennedy Street. I grew up on 13th and Farragut Street. We both grew up in Ward 4. And you ran a campaign in the midst of like a pandemic.
Yeah.
I know that I have a lot of my friends who are running for office and about to like really get started with their general election campaigns. And they're asking, how did she do it? And so if you could just tell us, what changed? You were doing a lot of meet and greets and other things before. What changed and how were you able to still continue campaigning in the midst of this global pandemic?
Yeah, when the pandemic hit, I think there was a second where maybe like a day or two where I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Because we were hosting about 5 to 7 meet and greets a week in people's homes, meeting with them and their neighbors. We were doing door knocking every single day. We were knocking doors. We had reached over 30,000 doors by the time we had actually had to stop. And so for someone who loves to actually, I love meeting people. I love talking to people face to face, and I feel their energy, and that energy keeps me going. We had to pivot very quickly. And we knew that we had momentum building. And so I didn't want that momentum to fall. So we actually pivoted within the 3-day period. That next Friday, we were like, okay, no more door knocking. Tuesday, we had our first virtual town hall. So we started hosting digital town halls. We started to actually host meet and greets on Zoom. And so many people were like uncomfortable with the process. So we had an amazing team who like got them comfortable with going online and doing meet and greets. And I first was like, oh, I don't want to do Zoom meet and greets. I don't think I'm going to be able to feel people's, and I feel the room, I'm that kind of person. But you know what? We were able to and create feeling just with talking and do that. And so we have people now signing up to do virtual meet and greets. We got on the phones, and I think that's so important because a lot of times we're knocking doors, we may not get answers, but we were able to talk to people and make thousands and thousands of phone calls and help people in that way. And we started to actually use our campaign as a way to help the community. And so they weren't just campaign calls. In the beginning, we did community check-in calls. And we were like, hey, this is, I'm Janice Lewis George running for Ward 4, but I just want to talk to you about how you're doing, how you're feeling. And you would be amazed at how many people were just so happy to be able to talk to someone about how they're feeling, how they're doing. And then we also did postcards as well. And our team got together and wrote, we did over like 8,000 postcards. And so individuals who didn't necessarily want to be on the phone were writing postcards to their neighbors. It was important that we did neighbor to neighbor cards too. And so you'd be like, hey, I'm your neighbor from 13th and Farragut. I know you're on 13th and Decatur. I want to tell you about my friend Janice Lewis George, who's running for Ward 4. And those were just so more impactful. And people love getting mail, especially handwritten notes. And so, in a world of, digital, we were able to find ways to have personal touches. And I think those personal touches really went a long way. And we didn't let this stop the momentum. We actually kept it going, and organizers just got creative and started inviting leaders to the table for town halls and getting other leaders involved. And so it was an opportunity for us to stand up and show that, no matter what comes our way as a community, we can grow together, build together. And we were able to do that and become successful as a result of it.
Well, that's awesome. So now you're the nominee now. Maybe you have a little bit of more time, maybe you don't, as you move toward the general election. But I want to kind of talk about, let's not talk about the elections and everything right now. I want to talk about you and your husband, because I've gotten to know Kyle now. I'm gonna tell you, so talking to Kyle, the funny thing for me is Kyle is good friends with my oldest nephew, Tahir. Mm-hmm. And Tahir for me is more like a little brother, though he's like huge and tall.
I was about to say Tahir.
I got to look up to him. And talking to Kyle about, the trips and stuff that they took, it was really, really nice and refreshing because I didn't know Kyle. But then as I've gotten to know you, talking to Kyle, I'm starting to realize just like how small our worlds really, really are. So that said, Kyle said I should ask you, what does he do?
Kyle, he is a network integration, a network integration executive at AT&T. So he works for AT&T corporate office. And half the time he's just on phone calls, making, closing deals and making sure that the systems are working within agencies. And so that's what he does. Every time every time I say network integration specialist, I'm like, honey, what does that actually mean? All I know is, he spends a lot of time on the phone, on calls all day and getting things done. And so it's been amazing during this COVID crisis to hear what kind of leader your partner is, because he's always like, okay, guys, let's get a line item here. I think we need to get to the bottom. I think we're wasting time. And I'm like, oh, wow, you're like the leader. Like you're making sure things are happening. And so that's what he does. And he's been with AT&T since Morehouse College. Morehouse actually has a partnership with AT&T where they bring in, Kyle was in the business school at Morehouse. And so they bring in Morehouse men and bring them up and on a leadership track because they wanted to be intentional about having more Black leaders and executives at AT&T. And so he went through that track.
Yeah, that's really interesting because he describes you as hardworking. I mean, and just all the things that we just heard you talk about in terms of running your campaign, we know that you are hardworking. But how did you all meet? Because he said he got to know you in law school. And so, look, I like the big smile on your face.
Because we both tell two different stories. The original story of how we first met, actually, DC is really small. One of my best friends, Audrey, who I went to Deal junior high school with and cheered with and danced with. Her family lives on 14th and Hamilton, and her family and Kyle are close. Her mom and Kyle went to Howard University together. And so there's a whole Howard University, and they're both Deltas. And so they grew up together. And so his god sister and I were best friends, and we actually met we met at her home for her high school graduation. And so after that, we would see each other all the time, at AUC homecoming events, and we'd always speak. But then my last year of law school, we reconnected at a post New Year's party. And the story will go left or right here. Kai will say I hit on him, and I'm like, absolutely not. You definitely asked for my number. And he said, well, you asked if I was dating someone, which means you cared. And I was like, no, I was just making conversation. And then Atiba, at the time, I was working at Nordstrom Rack part-time while doing law school. And magically, that was a Friday night. On Saturday, while I was working at Nordstrom Rack, guess who happens to show up at Nordstrom Rack? And he swears this was intentional, Atiba. And I'm like, it wasn't. He tells everyone, oh no, I didn't know she worked there. I didn't remember she said it. I just showed up. But we all know what happened. And we went on a date maybe the next week because it was his birthday. He said, oh, I would love for you to come to my birthday. I didn't make it to his birthday, but I text him, which is very rare of me to say, oops, I'm sorry, I couldn't make it. I have to work. He's like, well, you can make it up to me with a date. So we ended up just going to doing dinner and the movies, and then the rest has been history after that.
Wow. So I got one more question. We've got another guest that we've got to get in, and I know you have something else that you have to do after this because you're busy, but you're an AKA. I am. And you had a chance to talk to a group of women in Shepherd Park. Let's just real quick, because I know you got to go. Can you just tell us what that was like, having grown up in the ward and being able to talk to people in the community that used to mentor you?
Yeah, I think, for me, I'm obviously a third generation Washingtonian, and my grandmother didn't have an opportunity to graduate from high school. My mom didn't have the opportunity to go to college. And so I was a first generation college student. And I grew up on 2nd and Kennedy here in Ward 4. And I went to Rudolph for elementary school, but ended up going to Deal for junior high school. And when I went to Deal, it was like a whole new, world for me, honestly, coming from Kennedy Street and coming from Rudolph. And in that journey, I met so many of my now best friends who've literally been my best friend now for over 20 years because of that. And I remember, hanging at their homes, going to Shepherd Park. And that was my first time really seeing Black excellence, right? Oh my God, there's Black people with big homes and amazing artwork of Black artists. And I would be like, what does your mom do? How do you have this home? And, my mom's a U.S. postal worker, and I'm proud of the work that my mom obviously have done, but she was excited for me to have an opportunity to connect. And so, many of those women who were lawyers, doctors, psychologists, teachers, my professors, really, said, listen, it's about hard work. It's about getting a good education. And like my mom would say, it's all about lifting as you climb, as you do this. And so going back to those communities and talking and saying, you told me Black excellence was about, not just, what, your house or your cars, but it was about remembering your community, remembering to lift as you climb, remembering to, use education as an opportunity. Like Langston Hughes says, I go into the kitchen, I eat well and laugh tomorrow, and in that piece of the Langston Hughes poem, I too am America really was, a lot about what Shepherd Park represents. I too am America. We're going to eat, grow strong, and build our own communities and be successful and have all those things. And so it was just a full circle moment to say thank you to so many of those women, and for them to say, we're so proud of you. You listened to us, you've done the work, and we can't wait for you to be able to lead.
That's awesome. I want to say thank you so much. I know you're incredibly busy. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this. We look forward to having you come back and be part of our panel discussion and talk again. But I know you got a lot of work to do, and you still got to do work for the vote for the general election. Can you tell our audience how they can help continue to support you and follow you?
Yeah, so please go to Janese4dc.com. That's JANEESE and the number 4dc.com. Please donate if you haven't done so already. The maximum anyone can donate is $50. Please share the link of the website with a friend and get the information out for the November primary. And follow me on my Twitter and Instagram. I'm actually about to get my first blue check on Monday, guys. So please follow me at Janice for DC on Twitter, on Instagram, and Janice Lewis George for War 4 on Facebook.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. So we've got our next guest that is coming on is retired Air Force Colonel Kim Olson. She's running for Congress in Texas's 24th district. If you all are on Chalkboard Conversations on our secret group on Facebook, you may have seen some of her posts. Talk to her from time to time. Kim was one of the first female aviator pilots in the Air Force. She was the first to graduate from graduate school. I want her to talk a bit about that when she comes on. And she has a video a campaign video that's out there. Some of you all may have seen it. It's called Battles. So you can see her video there. We were hoping to show it tonight. She's on a tight schedule. So Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, T-Bud, it's so good to see you again. I miss you. So we're done with this. I'm coming back to DC and I'm with you.
All right. Well, I'm with you. I love the line that you have in your campaign ad that says, "If this battle is worth fighting, join us." That's what this is about. I think you're seeing all these protests and everything that are going on around the country, but it feels like we're in a battle. You're Air Force Colonel. You could tell us, what it's like for you being on the campaign trail, and what are your thoughts as you're seeing all these masses of people around the country who are coming together for a common cause, as well as what we're seeing globally?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thanks for all of those that are watching. Atiba, you just really, thank you for creating a space for us to have these kinds of conversations. I'll echo what your guest said earlier, which I'm very proud that she won her primary runoff, that, you just pivoted. And when you're a leader with experience and you have good staff around you, you make the best of it. And those of us who've had training in crisis situations can handle these kinds of things and then look forward to the thing that we can do. We have an incredible opportunity in our nation to do just Titanic-like changes that so need to be done and for the betterment of folks who've been left behind with our American dream. And we have to get this right, full stop. And so I have a couple feelings, and like you, I watch certain things that just bring, even to a colonel, and colonels do cry sometimes, absolute gut-wrenching tears to my eyes. And a couple things that I just found heartbreaking. And for those of you in the audience, I have a son who wears a uniform today. My husband and I are both retired. I'm retired military. He spent many years in the service, and we've raised a young man who now serves his country. And the thought of this, Atiba, was that this administration would leverage the United States military to put down her own citizens, and that I, as a mother, might actually look at my son from the other side of battle gear. And I would think to myself, my God, what have we done in this country? And I think sometimes that must be what it feels like in this nation when you're afraid of authority, when you're afraid of those that are supposed to protect and serve us. It has to be gut-wrenching sometimes out there. And this is what we must fix. And we will do this. This isn't we're gonna frickin' do this. And that's just the end of it. And I think what you see is an incredible movement in our nation that should have happened long ago. And it is happening now. The thing we need, Atiba, and this is why it's so important for those that are watching, is we need the political will and the political leadership to make this happen. The United States of America and her general population have spoken. We have painted streets. We have changed signs. We are taking down the names of Confederate generals across the military. We're banning the flag that represents slavery and oppression in the South. We are making big changes, but pulling a flag off of a pole will not change systemic racism in this country. Just like all the other hateful things that go on, if it's systemic, then it needs systemic changes. And that's what requires the political will to do it. And I pitch this, please vote. People march like they did. People were thrown in jail. People died for our right to vote. And you have to exercise it. It is the one time, even with so much voter suppression, that all our voices can be equal across this nation. One person, one vote. And in Texas, you know, we are pushing so hard because I have such an incredible diverse district. We're pushing mail-in ballots so that people don't have to choose between their health and their vote. We're making sure that the system within Texas, the voting system and systems across the country can handle the amount of mail-in ballots. So we don't hear this crap about, you know, well, there's fraud or there's, you know, all this kind of BS, that your voice will be able to be heard. And I say this with all sincerity, and I hope I echo many of the folks, the veterans that are out there. I wore a uniform for almost 30 years so that men and women can march on the street. And I was so proud of our nation when she took to the street. And that's how I truly feel, Atiba. And you and I had a conversation about it. That is truly how most of us feel that wear uniforms.
And you know, it's funny because every day I feel like I'm getting multiple calls from people who keep asking me. First, it's apologize, and I'm so sorry I never spoke up, and I just want to say I'm sorry. And what can I do? And the thing that I keep telling them is just do something. You know, it's like if all of us just did our small part, it becomes a bigger part. And I think that's what is really inspiring to see so many people coming together to do this and to try to right a wrong that has been going on for too long. I know you have to go, but before you do, can you tell people how they can help you with your campaign? Because, you know, you have the courage to step out and do it like Janice, but you need the help of many others in order to get you over the finish line. So if you could please tell people how they can help, how they can contribute to your campaign, how they can find you and learn more about you.
Well, you can go to kimforcongress.org, in which we have a whole laundry list of changes we need to make about reforming the police and around social justice issues. And if you're available, if you go to kimforcongress.org, we are actually having the lawyer that represented the young man, those of you that know, that was killed in their apartment. His name is Mr. Washington, and he was the civil rights lawyer that went against Amber in the civil suit. So we are having, you know, a social justice forum with 4 very predominant folks to help us to understand. And, you know, a lot of times, to your point, Atiba, politicians, we yak a lot. I've never met an audience I didn't like, but this is a moment in history, honestly, that we ought to just shut up and listen. That it is our turn to be quiet and to listen to people who are impacted the most by what's going on in this country. So yes, I would love for folks to contribute to my campaign, but what I would implore those that are listening today is find your local organizations that are working on these social injustice reforms and support them. And I did it. I stopped my campaign. I stopped fundraising because I really believe we get this right, we get America right. If we don't fix this, America ain't what she should be. So thank you for giving me a platform. I appreciate you. And I can't wait to see you in DC.
We can't wait for you to come to DC. We need you and we need others to come into Washington who think like you, who are leaders, who are proven leaders here to fight these battles. And we've got to come together, band together, and fight together. So thank you so much, Kim. And we look forward to hopefully having you on again in the future. It's a conversation.
Thank you, Atiba.
Thanks, Kim. All right, so with that said, we are now going to move into our next segment, and that is the segment where I get to bring in my friends, my co-hosts, Earl, who has his, I don't know what he's doing, but we got Earl, seldom seen, and I'm sorry?
I'm right here, that's all, keep going.
Seldom seen, and Nayada.
Yo.
So what's going on?
So I got something I want to say.
I want you to say it because I'm tired of talking.
Come on, Sophie. What's
You're
up?
still not tired of talking.
ground. And not the other color, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority. Fuck that shit, cause I ain't the one for a punk motherfucker with a badge and a gun to be beaten on. And thrown in jail, we can go toe to toe in the middle of a cell. Fucking with me, cause I'm a teenager with a little bit of gold and a pager. Searching my car, looking for the product, thinking every nigga is selling narcotics. You ready?
Okay.
All right, thank you for that. We needed that. And
Fuck the police.
yep, and you know, and I know that there are gonna be some people that are out there and say, well, they're good police, and we've got to save the police. And I'm trying to say that. I think we all agree with that. We're just trying to say that, and what hopefully that came across. And I did get a little emotional in that first part.
That was brilliant.
Thank you. Is we tired of the police fucking with us. You know, we're just trying to breathe, we're just trying to live, and so a lot of these things that we keep seeing are metaphorical. You know, and it's interesting just the fact that, you know, you had Colin Kaepernick who was peacefully protesting, and then you have this man who violently violated the life and tore apart a family, you know, in terms of George Floyd. So that all said, welcome you guys, and thank you for being here, and like all the work that you all are doing behind the scenes to make this show and build this into a bigger and more fun platform for our viewers out there. Shanitra, I want to get your comment in. You said thanks for letting us know more about Janice on a more personal level, and you know, we want to talk about the serious issues, but we also want to keep it light. So I'm even talking to somebody about being a DJ and like having some music intertwined.
You don't want me to be the DJ?
Be the DJ, but you're gonna have to get some better speakers. But
the subwoofers.
But that all said,
They were not on mic. They were not on mic at all.
No, not at all.
Next time.
Let's get into our topics. I mean, so the last few days, I know on the 2020 Fucking Matters platform on Instagram, we've had people who've been sending us pictures. We are way behind in terms of getting those up. So if you're watching this, we're gonna get them up, but there's so many because there's just so many signs and so many messages that are out there. I mean, what are some of the signs and messages that you all saw? Or you know, and I also want to get into like the clips of the players and the NFL and all that, but I really want to get into like these clips of these protesters. Like, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you feeling from these signs?
Yeah. So you know, it's wild because I find that like with protests, I love going to see what kind of crazy, awesome, wonderful. Like, damn, I wish I had thought of that. Damn, I wish I had said that.
Yeah.
But now, yeah, send us your signs so that we can post them up because, you know, that gets people motivated.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many amazing signs that people sent, and you're like you said, they are like thoughtful stuff. What have you seen, Earl?
I think one of the things that's funny is I'm blown away. Can anybody see me?
Yeah.
Okay. What's getting me is the number of protesters who show up at the events everywhere else. Like, I think the signs are cool, but seeing streets flooded with people in Los Angeles and Paris and Chicago. I thought I saw Chicago. I know Philadelphia just did
London,
Paris. And so for me, the ones that really kind of open me up are the ones that are the ones showing the number of people involved elsewhere.
I think
that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Sheldon.
I was going to say the thing that's motivating for me, building off what Earl was saying, was I love seeing the folks in the super suburbs having their own marches. A friend of mine posted a picture from Laurel Lakes, Maryland. Another friend of mine posted a picture. They've been having small marches and pop-up kind of reference points in true suburbia. You know, oftentimes these types of moments have always been associated with those people in the city. But for the first time, the awareness of people can't come to cities are staying places, but also exercising their voice. That's been probably one of the biggest things. The signs like Nyada said are like, I wish I would have thought of that. And the creativity and how people just are inspired by seeing ripped up pieces of cardboard and kids painting signs in the middle of the street to carry. It's almost like this movement of a groundswell, so to speak. So I can only imagine things yet to come.
I mean, this is the people's protest. You know? It's the language, of the posters, the I don't know. I mean, there's something about power in numbers. I remember meeting Stokely Carmichael shortly before he passed away, and he said, "There's strength and there's power in diversity." And that's what I think that we see, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. Yesterday, congressional members released the legislation that they are introduced legislation. Sorry, I couldn't find the right word. Introduced legislation that has some of the most sweeping, groundbreaking legislation that we've seen on the federal level in terms of reforming our police departments, and it still doesn't go far enough. But I think we still have to figure out how we engage and how we push these things, how we go from NIADA, from hope to engagement to change, to making change happen, and looking at and finding where our place is in doing that. Let's talk a little bit about Justice in the Policing Act. What are your thoughts in terms of this legislation?
Well, I have not read the legislation or bits of it, so I do think it's time, though. I mean, this is gonna have to happen. Something's gonna have to happen on a federal level, because I mean, we don't have recourse. Clearly, we don't. And I mean, there are, of course, some of the powers that be that don't think we deserve it.
Right.
But we're gonna have to take it.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have. I mean, and we have to hold our legislators' feet to the fire to enact it, because I mean, this is the Civil Rights Act of our generation.
Right. I mean, and I actually, I would take it a step further and say this is the human rights moment. We too often we are the ones who are condemning the way that a country treats its citizens when they protest in Hong Kong, for instance,
right.
In Venezuela, in other parts of the world. And right now, the world's eyes are on us, and it's amazing seeing this groundswell of support. Let's go into the NFL response. Do we have a clip of the players that we can show?
Oh, yeah, I can pull it up.
You got the link?
I have the link.
This is the whole reason why we have a production meeting, isn't it?
Yeah. I would say go ahead.
Right.
As Earl is doing that, the thing is that we see some of the sports. I mean, I've seen comments from San Antonio's coach, Popovich,
Mm-hmm.
Steve Kerr. I thought that it was really interesting.
George Floyd was brutally.
I think it was really interesting. I'm going to say this last thing. I thought it was interesting, LeBron James talking about how different it was when he makes a comment compared to Drew Brees making a comment.
Right.
The Fox saying, "Oh, shut up and dribble," but yet Drew Brees comes out, and that is what he talked about is exactly how we feel about a plethora of things around the country. But Earl, if you're ready, you can go ahead and play that.
Yeah, hold on.
That's fine.
Are you still waiting? You want me to keep?
Yeah, give me 2 more seconds.
So I think that it's, while yes, I mean it's a step forward, I think it's a little too late on behalf of the NFL. Like, I mean, how do we? I mean, are they really taking responsibility? Are they really accepting their error? How do they fix that?
They're just talking.
Right.
I mean, here's the reality. And I know my friends out there don't want to hear this. But the reality is when I look at the football and I like watching football. The reality is it's a plantation mentality.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
no lies said just now.
Huh? Yeah.
No lies.
No lies.
And they're trading players and they are an assembly line. So it's like you get hurt. Okay, we got another one to fill in.
Yep.
You know, we're the billionaires. We'll pay you and we'll negotiate and we'll give you a hard time to get what you think you deserve.
Right.
But in reality, for what it is that they're putting their bodies through, the fact that these owners are sitting up there getting the endorsement deals, the television contracts, the stadium deals, they are making out like, as my father used to say, like a fat rat.
Yep.
And it is a slave mentality.
So do y'all watch Ballers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, well, we were at a party with at least 2 of the guys from the show, actually.
But I mean, that's like, I mean, they put it all out on the line. Like these are our slaves, basically. Like we own you, and you have to do whatever we want you to do. And we're gonna be gallivanting around the world in our jets. And these are my niggas.
And we're gonna give you just enough to make you happy. You know, we know some of you gonna squander all your money. And I don't think that some of that is just because people just don't know what to do with their money. I think it's the constant contact of the head injuries and other things. But, you know, it's a gladiator sport. You know, you got to have a lot of courage to go down there as a wide receiver and run across the middle, as a defensive back to throw your body at somebody who's coming full force running at you. But, you know, it's a slave mentality. We feed into it as we do with so many other things. And I just want us to be thinking about that. So I don't know if Earl, you got that right?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
Let's go ahead and show that clip.
Hey, see George Floyd.
I know.
Share the screen.
I got it.
He was brutally murdered.
How many times do we need to ask you to listen to your players?
What will it take for one of us to be murdered by police brutality?
What if I was George Floyd?
If I was George Floyd?
What if I
Okay, let's start from the beginning.
was George Floyd? I was George Floyd. I was George Floyd. I am George Floyd.
I am Breonna Taylor.
I am Ahmaud Arbery.
I am Tamir Rice.
I am Trayvon Martin.
I am Walter Scott.
I am Michael Brown Jr.
I am Samuel Du Bois.
I am Frank Smart. I'm Philip White.
I'm Jordan Baker. We will not be silenced.
We assert our right to peacefully protest. It shouldn't take this long to admit. So, on behalf of the National Football League,
This is what we, the players, would like to hear you state.
we,
the National Football League,
condemn racism and the systematic oppression of black people.
we, the National Football League,
Getting it wrong and silencing our players from peacefully protesting.
we, the National Football League, please, Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives.
Amen.
Right. I'm so proud of these guys. I mean, like, I'm so glad that they did this. I'm disheartened that it took so long for them to, you know, to get to this point. But I mean, I understand, you know, you're looking at your livelihood, you're looking at your check, you're looking at your money, and you may not have a job. And this is what you do. This is all you know. But I'm glad that they did this. I'm glad they stood up to their bosses. I'm glad that they put this out. So, are you guys familiar with how it came about?
No.
I think one of the things hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think one of the big things, kind of revisiting exactly where we are, I think there was at a particular moment where they could not silence the players like they have always done in the past.
Right.
And I think the other thing too is very fascinating is that you're talking about a moment that they need the players more than the teams need.
Right.
They need the players more than they've ever needed them before. I think that their pivot was awkward. I think that they had so many top tier athletes that they could not silence or buy off.
Right.
I think everybody's deal is done except for Atiba's Dak Prescott at this particular point. And I think that the marquee players all came together and sent a note directly to the commissioner saying either back us or we will go out on our own. And I thought the timing was funny and unique. But we talk about the element of the physicality of football. I still hate every April when the combine comes on out of Indianapolis and they show how fast black men can run, how high they can jump, and all those kind of things, because it takes me back to the slave markets of Charleston when they determined who went where for what particular role, what particular job. So it still has very much of a buck mentality to me when it comes to how we perceive and how we react to these players.
So I want to bring in real quick, you know, Jimmy the Greek years ago lost his job.
Ooh.
Yes, I'll never, ever forget him losing his job for telling the truth. that the reason why the black players were faster and stronger was because they were bred that way. And I think that I see people, for instance, coming out and condemning the congressional members for wearing kente cloth and taking a knee yesterday. And I think that instead of condemning, we should use these opportunities to educate. To educate, for instance, like my friend posted a story about, she's Ghanaian, and posted about the significance of the kente cloth. That we go back and we talk about the reason why those congressional members took a knee, whether or not it was in their hearts or not. It started because of Colin Kaepernick. That we use it and we don't let the narrative be shaped by others. That we
It's a distraction.
Narrative.
It's
we
a distraction.
Continue to shape the narrative, and if we don't, we lose. And so we've got to stay together. We've got to stay strong. We've got to recognize that we are stronger because of our diversity, and that we need as many people coming. Because Seldom, you mentioned Dak Prescott. I still was very ticked off a few years ago when the Cowboys, after the national anthem, came out and took a knee after the national anthem. No, it wasn't during the national anthem. It wasn't the way that people wanted to see it. But it was
Jerry Jones went with them. That was the part that was crazy.
Jerry Jones went with him, and it was an acknowledgement. And he talked about it afterwards. But we changed the narrative because we let our sensitivities get in the way. And instead of saying we embraced them for doing this, that the reason why this knee is being taken is because the police brutality, and we kept the thing focused on that. Instead, we changed the narrative when we criticize people for doing something, at least for making an effort.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Go for it.
No, I was going to say, you have to understand this, is that there's money to be made when you criticize. There's money to be made when you create the distraction and kind of keep people back on what you want them to focus on. The money was made based upon converting people's thoughts to this man who was adopted and raised by white parents, who went to California, who went to college in California, who's never met his biological father because his mother will not tell him.
What are you talking about?
Colin Kaepernick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're talking about a story that makes no sense in terms of why would he go down this path? Why would he pursue it? And so all of a sudden, the story of why Colin Kaepernick came to this particular point became the moment in which they did not want to embrace it because it would have forced the truth before more people. And I think that is the whole thing also, too, of the mentality. Shut up, we're paying you a lot of money so you'll have no emotion, no reaction, and you should have no thought as long as we're paying you this money over a 16-week period, minus any kind of playoffs. We own you. So the concept of him having an individual thought, it can kind of go back to, the stories of Maryland slaves learning how to read one letter at a time, down in certain parts of the country, and all of a sudden kind of moving forward and gaining literacy one letter at a time until they knew the alphabet, and they began to kind of change the narrative of who they were and what they wanted from this particular world. That's the scary thing about the Colin Kaepernicks of the world. The other scary thing about it is that people are fearful of taking on the police because they feel like the police are going to undermine the service that they receive. People forget you pay taxes for police, okay? These are your servants. The term public servant means that they serve the public. You're paying your tax money for them. My concern always has been is that the story has been lost.
No, I agree with you, and I think that this is a unique opportunity in our history where people are listening, that we should continue to tell and point the finger and show the history of slavery and how it is impacted and is infected, like this virus, this pandemic, this global pandemic, that it has infected America, and that the only way to get out of it is to talk about it and try to figure out ways to heal. And part of that healing process is going to require both sides making some compromise. But I think that what we have to also recognize is that we should not be the ones that have to make the biggest compromise.
One of the biggest things I've always struggled with is that we're 5 generations removed from slavery. So if you can kind of go back, if you have somebody who's close to 100 years old in your family, you're really talking about a grandchild of a slave. Whether you want, you know what I mean? That's kind of moment.
That's my aunt. Who's 100 years old.
Right. And you begin to kind of unpack the stories that our elders told us were stories of how to stay alive, regardless of the situation we found ourselves in. We're now at a point where we're beginning to unpack it. So people now begin to understand, why do Black women still go to the bathroom in groups? why do black boys function and govern themselves differently when confronted with a person who perceives to have authority over them? All of those things are tied to working down the red clay road to the South at some particular point in time where you could not appear to be free. You cannot appear to be the person that you wanted to be because it might upset or offend someone else. That's the science of Jim Crow. That's the science of slavery. That is in our DNA.
Ingrained in our DNA.
It is ingrained in our DNA because there are any number of studies Nyada can talk to where we know honestly and really that there's something really more powerful that if you experience trauma continuously over generation, that trauma becomes a part of your DNA. The situationships that we as African Americans still find ourselves in, even with us being lettered and learned and having worldly experiences, are not that far removed from your 100-year-old auntie right now, TV. The same thing, you know what I mean?
And on top of that, a couple of weeks ago, I went down to Colonial Beach, Virginia, because there was something going on with my grandmother's grave, and I had to fill it with some dirt there. And then I left there and I went over to where my grandfather's buried, which is about a half an hour away. And I called my mom. Here's the wonders of technology. I called my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I want to go over to Montrose to visit Grandpa's grave site, and I'm there, and I'm walking around, and I found. I don't never recall seeing it before, the headstone for George Reed and Martha Reed. They are my great grandparents. And George Reed was born in 1852.
Wow.
Preach. Wow.
And his wife, his second wife, Martha, my great grandmother, was born in 1865. And so it was just like, wow, this is like really, really interesting to be able to find that. So
did you take pictures?
I did.
Awesome.
I did. In fact, I left there and I said, so when I said in my editorial that I felt like my ancestors were speaking to me, I honestly feel like there's this reconnection with my ancestors. I know we're running kind of long on time. So those of you all who are out there who are watching us, thank you for staying with us. We were going to talk about long voting wait lines. I'm going to suggest we get to that next week because there's some other stuff that's going on in Georgia. Because of their long wait lines. So let's go back and talk about that next week. Let's talk about real quick Black Lives Matter Plaza. Thoughts real quick. Everybody go around.
And brava for the gesture. Bravo.
So,
for the gesture.
Kudos for whatever staff or whoever came up with that idea and had that late night conversation and said we should go ahead and do it. And this is how we can get it done. Because sometimes when you execute something like that, Atiba, and the team and the listeners, you have to set aside your fear.
Right.
And the timing on that, and the art of success in America is tied to timing. To be able to go through an entire weekend where you dominated the news cycle, you basically went toe to toe with the president, who is the king of dominating the weekend news cycle,
and he upended.
He had other things to do to preserve democracy in America.
Right.
But he didn't even play golf. I mean, think about it. That took the entire bandwidth. But over time,
I love it for so many different political reasons, most of which I don't want to go to. Not because I don't want to say what I want to say, it's just because I don't want to have to hear Atiba's rant again.
I'm still gonna go again.
You're still gonna hear it.
I got three things. I got three talking points.
Well, if you're gonna say it, then I might as well say my point. Yeah, she just won re-election with it.
Fight.
Well,
I'm gonna say this. I'll say this to our audience out there. It's a great gesture, and I love the fact that it happened. But please don't forget. And I want you.
Let Earl say what he's finished.
I thought he was finished.
He can say it.
Go ahead, say Earl.
I have a response afterwards. Go ahead, Atiba. No, because what he's about to say actually needs to be said.
He wants the last word.
Go ahead.
Okay. Which he did, for all you potential future candidates at home, anybody who's ever thinking about running for office, from a political strategy move, if you don't have an opponent yet, find one, beat them in whatever field they claim to be winning. If it's a news cycle, if it's a press cycle, whatever it is, instead of running against another candidate for mayor, she put herself opposite Donald Trump and she smashed him in her city. Now, the two things about this that I feel are fascinating. One, It's part of why I do believe DC should have representation, but should not necessarily become a state. That's a longer conversation. But because the mayor of DC or whoever it is would have home court advantage. But what she did was she was smart enough to use it while it was legal. She was capable of doing it and then leveraged it and then won the news cycle and then got the aftershock of it being seen from space. There is nothing. I'm saying that clearly there's a lot of stuff that has to be fixed in the city. And as a DC resident, I'm not going to act like I'm 100% satisfied. All right.
He's the queen of petty in this group.
It is.
The queen of petty.
To win, this is how you do it. But to take it a step further. So yeah, she did that. She put the sequence in. She chose who her new opponent was going to be. She beat him on a national stage. And now whoever's going to have to run against her is going to have to find a way to pierce that shield.
All right. Well, I'm gonna just say one thing. The beautiful thing about it was it was Rule 3 of the Black Mama Handbook. I'm gonna steal your joy when you think you about to walk out this house and go do something with your little friends.
Yep.
And she
Get
told
your homework.
Right, get in there, do your homework. And oh, you didn't do the dishes last night. She stole his joy as only a Black mama can. If you've experienced Black mama love, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that was the beautiful thing about it. He thought he was smooth sailing. He shot rubber bullets. He dropped tear gas. He cleared the street. He held up a Gideon Bible in front of a Lutheran church and thought he had won the cycle. But guess what Black mamas do?
And she's a new mama.
Right. And Black mamas will take the joy out of your mouth and out of your heart at the moment's notice.
So I'm gonna say this.
Yes,
I applaud the move. I posted about it, but I hope that those who are out there who are listening and who will listen, I want you to remember something.
I agree.
While right now we are talking about Black Lives Matter, that there are 3 mamas who have 3 children who were killed by police officers in the last 3 years, and the body cams still have not been released. They were killed by police officers in DC. We don't hear much about it. That we live in a city where the infant mortality rate of Black babies is among the highest in the country. We live in a city where the illiteracy rate between Black and white children is among the highest in the country. And I could go on and on and on, but I'm gonna leave you with this one. That the number of displaced Black families and people in the country is higher in Washington, D.C. than in any other place in this country. Black Lives Matter. It doesn't just mean about police brutality. It's about the quality of life that we are giving our next generations. It's how we treat people, period. And the police officers in this city are asking for more money, and the police chief had the audacity to say that the reason why there are increased police brutality incidents around the country is because they are getting less funding, not more funding. So I'm sorry, I don't necessarily embrace the whole thing, because I'm not going to embrace that, the whole politics of it, because I'm also maybe the activist in me, the community person in me, is really about the lives of the people that you're supposed to be serving. So it's a little hypocritical to say and get all this fanfare and not address those things, because gentrification is real in a city that was once called Chocolate City.
But they didn't call it Chocolate City. We called it Chocolate City.
I didn't say they. It's not a thing about they. It's about the fact that I remember what this city used to be.
Right.
I remember how we used to care for each other. And we didn't put the guns, we didn't put the drugs in our neighborhoods. We know where that came from. We didn't create the criminal justice system that has ripped apart families forever. But that all said, we could go on and on and on, and maybe we should bring that back up as a topic next week. The history of lynching, we can't talk, we don't have time to talk about, but we need to bring that back up next week. Let's talk about the slap heard around the country. What was that woman thinking? Did you see what her husband said?
She's got mental health issues, which is actually why I wouldn't even go into it tonight. So one of the things that's funny is that the second I've got a media background just like Nayada. When I hear mental health, I take my hands off it. Like I can't go in on it.
Yeah.
Her husband,
I mean,
even it's just a brilliant crisis strategy to say it's a mental health issue, because then it makes somebody like me not want to touch it.
but wait, but here's the reality. Here's the reality. Racism is a mental illness.
I'm not. You know what? I hear people say that. I disagree with that entirely.
No,
I think
I'm not saying it can't be managed. I'm not saying that you in order for you to
be
stick to
humanized.
that level and believe about somebody based on the color of their skin and treat them in such a way that you can slap them is indeed mental illness. So I have to agree with you.
She didn't slap her. She put her hands on her.
She
dumb.
not slap her.
No, that's ignorant. Don't get me wrong. It's
You
ignorant.
get to the point where you're gonna get slapped.
The one thing that
this ain't your country.
But also too, the thing about it is the flexibility. If you're not African American, if you're not a brown person, you're not allowed to have a mental illness. That's the thing about the narrative that was established around that experience. If that was two brown women, it would have been a totally different kind of thing. But I'm sorry.
Exactly. That's why I'm not keen on calling it a mental illness, because what I don't want to have is I don't want somebody slipping up saying nigger in their office 2 years from now, and then them getting
reprimanded because
I don't want them getting disability for just being a racist like 2-3 years from now because it's convenient. I'd rather them not be in the office, but I'd rather them also be
But you know, Earl, you bring up a good point. I know we got to get off of here, but you bring up a great point. One of the biggest points I want to say is this: the recalibration of the discussion of what's acceptable in the workplace is really happening right now. I'm seeing a modulation and a movement akin to post 1989 after the Nita Hill hearings, when what was acceptable in terms of on guard, off guard, in terms of things that you discussed. But you're seeing a recalibration of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable in America in a professional setting. And it's amazing. If you look at the guy who was on the bike trail out in Maryland, got fired on the spot. Right. We never would have done that a couple of years ago, because that person would have been attributed. He would have had stress at work and stress at home. So that was the justification for. This stuff is becoming extremely swift because of social media. It's also recalibrating and redefining the unbelievable moments that African Americans have had since slavery ended up until now, but now being documented in a way that a new narrative and a belief of it is really happening. And people now get why we're frustrated, why we're afraid, why we're scared, and why we fight back.
True. I was listening to a radio show this evening, and they were like, 2 weeks ago, would you believe that, what is it, 68 or some astronomical number of people believe that racism is an issue? Percent of people believe that racism is an issue. 2 weeks ago, do you think that number would have been the same?
Nope.
Nope.
And that's why I think this is the time to talk about. My mom had kept telling me, because I kept talking about Tulsa and I kept talking about Rosewood. She was like, don't forget Wilmington. And there's so many other insurrections that happen around the country of slaves uprising that we don't hear about. But in terms of Tulsa, bombs were literally dropped.
Right.
Rosewood, they burned it. And
Right.
then you look at Wilmington. Here you had poor whites banding together with middle class and affluent blacks, and they took over the elected positions throughout that county, throughout that area. And there's
North Carolina?
Huh?
North Carolina or Delaware?
Wilmington, North Carolina.
Oh, where I'm flying tomorrow. Okay, that's good.
And they said, and then what happened there is that they called it a coup d'etat. They said it's the only time in American history that it came close to where they literally overthrew the government. So, and this was like the Klan and all that. So I encourage people out there to go and read that, because we don't necessarily want to be telling you to slap people back physically, but we want you to be empowered, no matter what your ethnicity is, to be able to slap back at people who still have this racist tone with knowledge and information, to be able to say, no way, no more, buddy.
Right.
We know, and we're going to let you know, and we're going to keep telling it, and we're going to keep speaking it, and we're not going to let you, because I still think that the guy who's occupying space at 1600 represents metaphorically, figuratively, and in some instances, literally, the plantation mentality that has long plagued this country. And that if we keep pointing the finger back and we keep looking at it from that standpoint, we can really start to tear back the layers of what this is. But we keep looking at this as like, oh, this is something new, then we can't really address it. This is something that's old. Our ancestors, the history, we have the information to combat this. We just have to use it. So with that said, let's go to our lightning round. It's a hard question. If you had a chance, who do you want to slap?
Who you were just talking about?
All right. Who do you want to slap, Earl? Who don't you want to slap?
That's a better question.
Yeah, you'll get to
right now, anybody who takes their eyes off the ball. I think we've got 2 or 3 realistic policy decisions that are happening, and so it's lightning round. I got to keep it short. But right now, we're trying to reform how police operate. We want to get some oversight so that people can actually protect themselves from police officers. And then I also want to see Congress and Senate do their job and legislate on behalf of the people they represent. So in that situation, these are the only 2 things I got time to talk about. I don't have time to talk about Kente clause. I don't have time to talk about whether or not George Floyd had a porn background. I don't have time to talk. I don't have time for any of that stuff. Stop trying to find TMZ moments to keep you interested in stuff you should be doing as a citizen. Right now, the only 2 things that are important: reforming the police and making sure whatever happens over here is properly legislated formally. That's it. Then we get rid of Trump in November. But right now, those 2 things.
I feel attacked. Go ahead. I feel attacked. I was talking about all of that.
You weren't getting attacked. Tell them who you want to slap.
I want to slap the Attorney General for not exercising his role, responsibility, and otherwise to rewrite exactly how state and local law enforcement agencies receive grants tied to the federal money they receive for teaching police officers. That's the person I want to slap. The Department of Justice has failed us across the board for the last 4 years. They should have been involved and invested in these issues when the local municipalities were not going to do anything. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what Bobby Kennedy was doing.
I want to slap.
And I also want to slap the 55 million people who didn't vote in 2016.
And I want to slap all those who voted for Trump.
Okay. And I want to slap anybody, and this is going along with Earl, anybody who puts their words or whatever out that derails the process of us staying on focus with this, with what the agenda is in terms of addressing criminal justice reform in this country. And anyone that steps in and keeps putting out this stuff about Joe Biden, I want to slap you hard as hell. Like, actually want to do a back slap. So I just want to say, just shut up. If it's something you don't like, just shut up and let us work to try and figure out how we get this country back going in a semblance of some type of normalcy. And then let's then put our foot on the pedal and make sure that we hold these elected officials accountable to do things, because we cannot get anything done if you don't win the presidency, if you don't hold the House, if you don't hold the Senate, win the Senate, and then keep going down ballot and vote and win the governor's mansions and the state legislatures and your city council seats. Otherwise, we're going to end up still having these problems. So shut up, step back, get out. Otherwise, I want to backslap.
Get slapped.
Yep. All right. But that's it. I want to thank you all. Thank you all so much for your hard work. Thank you all to those who have been watching this tonight. If you want to see past episodes, you can go on Chalkboard Conversations podcast. We have some of our past episodes there. But if you want to listen, you can go to spikefish.radio and you'll see Chalkboard Conversations podcast, or you can also find us on iTunes. Please remember that the thoughts and the opinions of our guests and our host are theirs alone, and they do not reflect the positions of Party Politics US or Spikefish Radio. With that said, I want to say thank you to Nayada, Seldom Seen, Earl. And we will see you all next week at our regular time, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Good night.
See you then.
Good show.